By the way, Nicole, I fear that we may need to cancel or reschedule the diversion meeting because I haven't, I sent a draft agenda late by my standards, but I sent one to our chair and I haven't heard back from her as to whether or not the guests that we were trying to line up are supposed to show, if there are additional attachments, you know, that whole thing. So.
Well, let me know. I mean, we have time, so. I know we said by noon today, but let's see what happens.
Okay.
I have to post it by tomorrow.
Right. Yeah. So we'll see. But yeah, definitely. If we need to, we can, you know, have a special meeting or, you know, wait till next month. But yeah. I haven't heard anything so far.
Hi, Renell. Hi, Apollo.
Hey, how's it going?
Hey, how's it going?
Doing all right. Glad you're here.
Yeah.
Yeah, forum.
Here.
Yay.
Good
Yeah.
to see everybody.
I think the plan is to see if we'll have a few more folks joining in a few minutes and then probably get started 3:05. Although, as Nicole was saying, we're already at quorum. I just know that we might have a couple other to join, and I think that's reasonable accommodation.
I had a full body today. This is a lot easier. Small for me.
Good. I'm wondering if I'm able to share a screen. Maybe I should just give it a shot now.
Let me
think
make you host so that you can do that.
It looks like it's not stopping me.
Oh, okay.
Okay. I just figured I might begin with this because I'm often talking about that in the intro as the background, and I could also perhaps start with this. People see our agenda. Yeah, that's coming through for folks.
Yes.
Great. I know I've been there sometimes in meetings. You know, I don't have the agenda. Should I say anything to anybody? So.
When we start, I'll post it in the chat too.
Great. Thank you.
There's some weird thing with Zoom unless everyone's present. If I post something right now and someone joins after the fact, they don't see the chat.
Yeah, that is sort of an odd feature. Hi, Jill.
Hey there.
We're planning on having folks join in just a few minutes, get started at about 3:05.
Hey, Melvin, I think I follow you from meeting to meeting to meeting.
No, I was just thinking that, like, Jill, do you have a GPS on me? Are you?
I'm stalking you.
Hopefully this is your last. This is my last one, so hopefully it's your last one for the day too.
Yeah, no, I have one more tonight.
Okay, great. I can see the number of participants. Okay, so why don't we get started? Hi, everybody, and welcome to our subcommittee meeting. I'm Jeff Landau, and I am a steering committee member with the Racial Justice Coalition in Contra Costa County. And I'm confident that I at least have been introduced to, have had the chance to meet everybody in this call. And thank you, Nicole, for adding to the chat, the agenda link. That said, let's just go around and say who we are and what org we're representing, and then we'll have the chance to go through the agenda together. And pretty informal the way that we're set up, given the small size of the group, and we'll just keep moving. Hi, staff.
Hey, how are
Welcome.
you?
Good. How are you?
Good. Sorry I'm late.
No worries. No worries. We're
Jeff,
just
do you want
getting
me to
started.
use the roll call to control that?
Sure. That'd be great.
Melvin,
Afternoon, Melvin Russell. I am with the probation department.
Stephanie,
Hello. Is there a certain prompt I'm supposed to?
At this point, we're just saying our name and org. That's it.
Okay, Stephanie from Rise.
Ronell,
Ronell Ellis, Health Right 360.
Apollo,
My name is Apollo Solse. I'm a pastor at the Bay Church. We serve Concord Bay Point area.
the Jill,
Hi there, Jill Ray with Supervisor Candace Anderson's office.
and Lynette,
Williams, and together Contra Costa, and also from the Public Defender's Office.
and Chris,
Chris James, W. Haywood Burns Institute.
and I'm Nicole Popchick with the Office of Reentry and Justice. That's it.
Great. Thanks, Nicole. And yeah, I think what I would normally do for an orientation, perhaps I would do differently, given how everyone in this space has some background experience with how we've arrived here, I think. But that said, just having up here is guiding us as we're approaching what we're doing with the agenda here. It never hurts to just kind of go back to this history of everything we're working on in some ways is informed by and comes from the history of the task force work, and how the supervisors in 2016 had come with basically the mandate of the work that the task force would do and passed on to the oversight body. And I know everybody here knows this history, but that what we're doing is, I think, empowered by has the further strength from this history. It's anchored by that. So I guess it's just to encourage us to feel like, where is this going? What are we doing? That it's part of this longer line of progress, and that it isn't coming from nowhere. The proposals that we have, the work that we do, it's because we've been deputized by the supervisors to address these things and come back to them with plans. And so I hope I'm coming to that with encouragement, and feeling that we have more power than sometimes we will allow ourselves. I think that's natural for lots of times in big systems, and what is exactly our ability to do here. And this isn't my ability to decide how the sheriff does or how probation does or how any of these parties do, but by speaking, by choosing to exercise the voice here that we have, we can influence and come to, I think maybe more creative solutions by all participating. So right, That's basically what I would do in terms of my intro for this group. But maybe just invite, I think, Apollo, this might be your first subcommittee of this group, right? Yeah.
Yeah, it is.
Okay, cool. And Lynette, I'm not sure if you've been to this subcommittee specifically in the past. And with that in mind, I would just invite, if there's some part of the history that is, I don't know, not familiar or would be worthwhile kind of going over in the history or what we're doing here, want to create space for that. Not to put you on the spot in the moment, but also to just kind of open that up for as the meeting goes on. Cool. All right. And we're such a small group that I feel like it's reasonable to just unmute, frankly, rather than we'll have some system, but that's my take on it. Is if you want to chime in, we're kind of in a small space at the table with 9 people. So yeah. And I'm thinking of implementing, and maybe I'll just very briefly model here. I had thought about doing this several meetings ago, but we've had a couple delays. Something that my choir, and this is part of the concept really of blending some of our individual life narratives and what got us to here, can I think be further encouraging to each other. It kind of humanizes our process of, especially in the space where we've got our digital box, and it's harder to have the personal connection. So that was my way of saying that my choir, which is the Oakland Interfaith Gospel Choir, has taken to, in our little meetings of having intros from new persons and old persons to talk about how did they come to the choir and why do they love it and things like that. So I'm thinking maybe we do something like that with our committee members, to take a minute and a half, something like that. And not everybody at the same time, but on one day, and then you kind of know what's coming up and say the reasons. So I'm going to model that now, and then we'll decide if somebody's interested in doing it next time. But I came to this work to, I mean, generally, why am I interested in racial justice issues and taking that on beyond just try to do excellent felony practice or whatever it might be, is that I think coming to public defense work came through the thread of being interested in civil rights issues generally, and having in undergraduate time in Michigan, volunteering ACLU chapter on issues really having to do with the rights for marriage equality. And that was back in 2000 and then 2002 that was really a central focus of what was going on there locally. And I felt like I was really interested in doing that. Went to law school with an ambiguous sort of sense of what I might want to work on, but knew that it would have to be something public interest and something sort of service oriented. And continued to have some experiences with ACLU through internships after my first and second years, and then felt like through a range of assignments that came some experience with the Fourth Amendment and right to privacy. And specifically, I got involved in a case in Detroit that was a search of a club, and about 120 people there were all strip searched at this club. And it was shocking to me that had happened and what was going on. And it was definitely racially loaded, what had gone on. And the response from the city and from just in litigation crystallized some things, which I think I had known, but it also made it more clear that this was something I wanted to do in terms of individual rights, and felt like, wow, this could be an important part of people's privacy. And that led, I think, to public defense work, which in turn had me exposed to the realities of the system and who is impacted by policies, and particularly in misdemeanors. I felt like, wow, this is such low-level stuff. Some of this is simple possession or tiny amounts of theft or persons on whatever it is, non-payment of a certain amount, and it was determined they could pay. So really felt like that was also crystallizing for me how important these issues are and how we could change systems to really make it less harmful than it is. So that's a little background on me. It's the tiniest bit, right? But it kind of gives you a sense of how I came here and how I became motivated to do this, and feel I'm really invested in changing systems here, and that it's possible on the local, right? I mean, I'm kind of going at what is a little bit impossible to talk about. I'm going to change the federal system, but that we can come together and work on Contra Costa is doable, I think. So right, I'll invite at the end, and maybe when we have our planning meeting, someone to tap to consider taking a minute or two and talking about their path to coming here. So with that, let me go back to our agenda and invite public comment. We've got tiny group, but it's part of the agenda, and let me ask if anyone has any public comment. Seeing nothing at this moment. I have in previous meetings, and I'm intending to do here too, just kind of have an informal policy of that there isn't just the one chance for public comment. There will be at each of these agenda items the opportunity for public comment too, to speak on it, as well as if there's something that comes later. I think the door is open. It just can't be continually using that. Now this is my another chance for public comment on the same item, but I don't want folks to feel like they missed their chance because either they came late to the room or they now thought of something that they feel like would fit that box. And, you know, you were entitled to 2 minutes as far as I'm concerned. So you might as well take the space if you want to. And even that, I think, has some flexibility, 2 minutes. I'm just kind of throwing that out. So, right, not having public comment, we have a good amount of time that we have still set aside here. And we're planning to go until 5. To go through the record of actions from November 12th. And maybe I'll just scroll down as we're having that. Yeah. And I don't know if folks have this already, but if not, just going through what this had been. And you'll remember we had the presentation by Carol Burton, Jeweled Legacy Group, and what we had heard about and all the details of the program there and how it had come to be. So we got pretty rich detailed notes here, which is great. Discussion on the Youth Advisory Council planning, which I'm intending to talk about both of those on our agenda today. Future meeting scheduling announcements. Okay, so just having gone through that quickly with everybody, anyone have any questions, issues, changes for the November minutes? Record of actions, I should say. Okay, I didn't see anything either. So is there a motion to approve the record of actions from November?
Motion to approve.
Thank you. Second, somebody?
Second.
Fabulous. I will ask if there's anything before just calling the vote.
Do you
No.
mind when you first and second just saying your name? Because I don't quite recognize everyone's voices. Just that would be helpful.
I think that was Stephanie first and Apollo second, but for future.
Yes, that was Stephanie.
Yeah, and that was Apollo.
All right.
And I think we're ready to call it. Yep.
Did we get
Thank you.
public comment? No.
That's good point. I'll invite public comment if there is any. Thank you, Nicole.
Mhm.
So hearing none, I think we are ready to call the vote.
All right, Jeff,
Aye, or yes. I think I'm going to start moving to yes. It is what personal preference.
Melvin,
Yes.
Stephanie,
Yes.
Ronell,
Yes.
Apollo,
Yes.
motion passes.
Okay. So moving right along, we've got our agenda notes from last time, which I would do my sad face emoji at this point and say, it didn't happen. Okay, moving right along, we're having our meeting now. And that would have been ideal had we been able to all get together previously at that time, but we're moving forward and focused on what we can do today and what the next steps are. So very little, I think, to weigh in on from the notes of last time, just to say it was canceled due to lack of quorum. And this feels like, wow, so procedural-ish, but any questions about the record of actions from February? Be careful with my tone. If there is anything, I don't think there was anything I saw. So let me ask if there's any public comment on our approving this record of actions from February before we take a vote on it. Any issues with this one? Not hearing any. I will ask if there is a motion to approve record of actions from February.
Motion to approve. This is Stephanie.
Thank you, Stephanie.
This is Melvin. I'll second.
Thank you, Melvin. Any questions on this before I call the vote? I think we are set to do it.
All right, Jeff,
Yes.
Melvin,
Yes.
Stephanie,
Yes.
Ronell,
Yes.
Apollo,
Yes.
motion passes.
Fantastic. If we can't avoid doing this, and we can't because it is important to do it, then at least we can do it quickly, right? Okay, great. Moving on to our next point, which is our agenda for today, talking about the Community Capacity Fund. And what we have as attachments, there's attachment 3. These were the highlights that, I mean, I according to Carol Burden, she was saying, you know, I really think the lessons learned section, she had said. So I included that as an attachment. This is a selection from what we had at that meeting back in November when she had presented, and we had, I don't know what, 120 something pages that was there, which I think is good for us to just be able to dig through as time goes on, but it's a lot to digest in a space like this, for sure. So kind of taking these things that had been set out by them and reflecting. And I also included, or we included this page, which just showed I thought it was useful to have that visual model so we could see the steps of how is that exactly going, the various stages, and perhaps using that as a template, right? Doesn't mean that we would actually use the exact same phase, but it gives us a jumping off point to say, well, we could switch these different parts or make it a little bit longer, whatever that might be. And then final, I think, page right that we have that's related to this agenda item, and it's the last one in our agenda packet, is a draft of what could be the outline that we in turn would present to the oversight body, who in turn would present that whatever developed doc. I don't know exactly what format we'll take at that point, but the RJOB bigger group would present to the Board of Supervisors for their consideration and approval. And I'm seeing this as moving, whatever the analogy is, moving the ball forward, or having this get closer to the the finish line, in the sense that we've had a sort of ambiguous concept of there will be a community capacity fund. There will be more money for these community-based orgs. And that's a very quick statement of it, but we had some sense of it. Dante Blue, you remember meetings ago, had given us, these are the different models, doing some research what these things could be. And then based on that, we thought, let's really have some input from Alameda County and the model that they had there, especially in light of comments from Chief E. Salmon Kraus. And then having that presentation and the discussions afterward, this has led to this stage, right? Which is a presentation of a proposal, which I'm not trying to put in this space as this is what we're doing, as much as, okay, we talked about, and we were hearing from Carol Burton, this two-phase process, that there's the first phase where a lot more people, however many, there's a larger number of orgs are going to get a smaller amount of money and some training and some cohorts and education and all the things that come along with that kind of community with it. But less deep in terms of the level of experience and investment and everything at that phase, because it's going to hit more people. And then after that, the second phase of we're going to have a few selected folks that are going to do a much more deep, intensive process. And this is a proposed structure based on that, that if we're going to get to an actually fully functioning thing that is getting money into community-based orgs, it kind of has to take this process of thought, education from folks who are doing it, putting together something like a skeleton, and then developing all the stages on top of it until we get to a request for proposals and further, and we're getting to actually like boots on the ground type of thing. So lots of me talking, and having this in mind, I guess I would invite, if people are seeing this, have questions about, you know, what exactly are we talking about? Like, what's the request now? I mean, my thought is that we have input on this outline, make modifications as appropriate, and that we would send it to the bigger group. But do people have questions about that, have suggestions of what might change, what we might add?
Thanks, Jeff, for working on this and putting this together. I'm assuming Chris worked on this as well, so thank you all. So I guess one of my questions is kind of what is our role? How much more do we need to do? Is it just coming up with a template to report or to share with the group, or do we need to kind of dive in and carve out more of what these different phases look like?
Yeah, Chris.
So thanks for that question, Stephanie. My instinct is this being the racial justice oversight body, obviously the larger group being that, in terms of building this out in a way that hopefully ensures that the funding is disseminated in a racially equitable way, is something that I think this group would be well situated to do some work on, particularly when I think about these phases, right, based on the presentation that we got, you know, just an idea of sort of what the criteria are for funding, right? I don't think these are things that you necessarily have to leave open for someone else to interpret. I think you might be able to drive these, and that doesn't have to be, you know, dozens of pages of legalese, but there can, I think, be some idea or some framework or some sort of guidelines in terms of, you know, who this is for, who would be qualified, you know, and sort of what, you know, what aspects or traits you'd want to see and then to fund based on any organization's ability to demonstrate those traits or aspects. So I would try to take at least a shot at doing some of that. But I don't, for the sake of what we're trying to do, I don't know if we need to be incredibly extensive. I would just try to make sure that you can drive what it looks like from an equity standpoint.
I can't remember if we did or not, but did we like draft a purpose statement for this at all?
I don't think we did. I think what we just have used the recommendation from the RJTF, which says essentially to build a community capacity fund to support community-based organizations involved in reentry. So I mean that's possible. If folks think it's necessary, you know, to dive into that and build out something more specific, that could be a part of this project as well.
I mean, I actually think that could be something good for us to think about drafting and kind of adding on to that kind of statement that was made. Just because I think that it may be a little vague for people, and folks may not understand exactly what this is for. And so I think it could be helpful to just clearly state specifically like what this is for and kind of why we're doing it.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And it's different phrases. I don't know, like mission creep or whatever, but the idea of having a North Star and what exactly are we doing? What's our goal? And what is this about? And having that stay, I think, is really important with whatever project's going to happen. So I think it's a good idea, Stephanie, that we have some intentional process of saying this is what it's about. And I'm also thinking maybe there is some language that we can take from the work plan, because we did spend some time in the subcommittee, I think, putting together what the overall mission of the subcommittee is, which isn't exactly the same thing as the capacity fund project, but it may include, have some overlap there in terms of just hammering out what the language is. So I think that would be a good portion that we could include in a proposal to the bigger group. Other folks' thoughts? Specifically, anyone have thoughts on a statement of purpose, whether it's worthwhile for us to do that, and or thoughts on what that might be?
Just a quick question. So the statement of purpose, are we saying that this is for the larger RJOB to understand what we're trying to do?
I think that's part of it. I think that's what part of it would be. And also that it might shape the project entirely over its lifetime, right? I mean, it would go to the RJOB, which could modify, and then the Board of Soups, which could modify. But lots of times, I think the initial framing can stay, and that can be a bedrock thing when there's deciding who's going to get the grant for facilitation, or how is this thing supposed to roll out. And when years from now there's that statement of purpose, it can be like, isn't this thing all about what you guys said back in 2021?
So the statement that Chris had talked about, where does that all fit in? It seems as though I don't want to get bogged down in process. If, because what Chris had mentioned, I mean, that it rang to me of, okay, I understand what we're trying to do. And so are we taking that and then adding on, or so I guess I'm just confused in that sense.
Yeah. So I guess I think, it is in some ways just kind of making this thing up as we go because we don't have it like an already existing project. But I'm thinking like the attachment that we have the last page of this agenda packet, something a little bit more filled in, and maybe at the header saying statement of purpose. And it's for consideration when they're receiving it, when the full group's receiving it, and then ultimately the supervisors. Just has a more fully thought out aspect. And it might be just what Chris was saying, but we have to get the words on paper. And I think when we were doing our prep meeting, as we were putting together what this outline would be, we're saying, there's a lot of other thoughts I have on this, but it starts to get a little bit too filled in before we have the full group to start saying what are the pieces we want to add to this. So yeah, I think maybe we can agree upon what those words are. And ideally, I started to open up this Word doc. It'd be great if we can do it right now, because I hate to put stuff off to another time where we can agree on the words, and it may not be, but at least to get that kind of ball rolling, because it's hard to have the communication in between.
I think kind of what I said before is not necessarily recreating something new, but expanding on the statement that Chris shared. And I think it's helpful because at that time when that particular statement was created, we didn't really know exactly what a community capacity fund would look like, or even what we just knew we wanted to create that, but didn't really have any kind of teeth or kind of what that would exactly look like. And I think now that we're starting to kind of formulate what that's actually looking like, it would be, which is a little bit more than what the current statement is. I think it would be helpful, not only for our job, because we do have new people on our job that haven't been involved in the process from the beginning, but also for potential community organizations that will be applying for this funding, so that they're very clear in what exactly this is and how we're looking to build their capacity. So I don't think it necessarily has to be like something that's we're putting like a lot of labor into, but I just think it's just expanding on the current statement. And with that said, I think I've said before in other groups, it's hard for me to wordsmith anything like right in the moment. So I'm just throwing that out there.
That's true, for sure. Others' thoughts? Input?
And another option could be, which we've done in other subcommittees, is one or two folks working on the statement, and maybe taking from the current statement and even looking at some of the language that may be in the presentation that, oh shoot, I forget what her name is, but Jewel Legacy Group, looking at that. Thank you. Looking at that presentation, seeing if there's any language that could be used from that, or looking at some of the language from some of the other documents that we have, if any language needs to be pulled into that, and crafting something.
That's a good idea to take from what may already be existing as a model. I mean, I don't think we're taking too much from what's there. We're trying to learn from what's already been done to a certain extent, as at least a jumping off point. So that is a good idea, I think. I was just trying to take some of this other language from.
Yeah, that's a great place to start. I would just add for everybody here, Because I mean, it sounds like that will probably be an agenda item for next meeting to look at something that has been drafted in the meantime. I would encourage you all to think about, particularly those of you who have been in funding processes like this or work for similarly situated organizations. Think about what worked and what didn't, particularly what didn't, right? Like what you don't want to see. Let's make sure we're writing those things out with specific language to make sure that they don't happen. If there was a shortcoming in terms of a funding process or an application process or something like that. And that said, we don't need to get too deep into the weeds on it, but these sort of larger ideas that drive making sure that everybody kind of has access to this, that it's that what it's designed to do is actually stated and put forth in a way that is easy to understand and makes sense for everybody. Just make sure that you're thinking about those things, on your own time. If if there are things that come up in the meantime, and when we have that next meeting, we can make sure that we cover all of those bases well. Hopefully, in a way that, in reference to other subcommittees that have done this, like doesn't take us several months, because it can become a long process, and if it takes a long time to get it right, like as long as we get it right, that's the right thing to do, so it's fine. But to the extent that you can think about or anticipate certain issues that come up that you want to make sure that you speak to in some way so that it's clear in this language, please do so.
Thanks, Chris. Others' thoughts on just the statement of purpose part, at least at this point? I copied and pasted some of the language from the work plan. So the work plan overall mission, I have that as just quoted from, and then also the language from that last, if you're seeing that in this section.
Yeah,
Right.
I was gonna say that I do agree with those who spoke before me. I would just have to, really focus on it in particular. I know it was something that we discussed, but I didn't put personal focus on it to make sure that I had something for this meeting to really bring it together. But now I see the necessity, just making sure that, hey, take a look at this and kind of brainstorm privately to bring something to the table, definitely for the next meeting, because like Chris say, you don't want to drag this thing out. It shouldn't be a ginormous task to get it done. But yeah, definitely, if we all probably put some personal, private thought into it, we'll probably be able to collaborate on that and collectively bring something, solid enough to present.
Yeah, thanks, Renell. I think that I'm hearing right from a number of different voices. Let's have a little bit of time to have this settle in, put together what exactly the finalized language will be. But we're already putting a little bit of forward progress here in the sense of maybe we will have a statement of purpose, taking some of the words from some of the language already that we have from the work plan and seeing if there's things from the Jewel Legacy docs. And then let me just move to the second portion and get a general sense. I don't think this is a voting item, but it is kind of, is everyone feeling comfortable with going ahead with the concept of the two-phase, which is phase one, more people, smaller amount of money. Phase two, smaller number of orgs, more money investment, and doing it that way. Because some people could say, no, what we do is just have as many people as possible, small number, we don't do that second phase thing. Or we're not interested in having the broad first phase, we just want to do deep dive with people with the second phase. I'm proposing, based on the conversations we had after receiving the presentation by Dante and his research, and also the conversations we had following presentation by Jewel Legacy Group, that we go ahead with the hybrid model. But that's a significant kind of structural decision that I think we would decide together before we send that as a proposal to the oversight body. So let me take a second to weigh in on that specifically. How does everybody feel about this two-step thing, the hybrid model? Anybody have questions about what I'm talking about with that? Or at least the general concept of the phase 1, phase 2?
And this would be for, well, let me see. It's kind of, the hybrid two-part model, is it necessary? I mean, you know, it just depends on, you know, it should be something that's, if it needs to be a two-part, you know, something that really needs to happen. If not, a one, you know, a non-hybrid model would be fine, if possible. But if it's not possible, then, you know, a hybrid model is then, you know, mandatory.
Yeah, I mean, what I'm picking up from what you're saying is that there's got to be a reason for us to be doing it, right? We shouldn't just be doing it through the phases because we feel like, yeah, 2 is better. It has to be something we're getting from it. And I think my sense from the Jewel Legacy Group that the hybrid had the benefit of you're able to touch a lot of people, more orgs than you would be otherwise if you were just talking a larger amount of money from the outset. And I think it also built the foundation for the project continuing because you could show all these different people that it touched and get more feedback that you could present for the continuation. And it would allow you to see like, okay, these folks are really serious. They're really putting in the time. They look like they're successful. We can invest in them because we had this first phase. And also if you want to do the real deep dive stuff, it's going to take more resources than you can do in the broad, right? Like there just isn't enough money to do that and staff and expertise to try to have that mentorship and all the things that'll really mean for the deep investment. So the idea is it's best of both worlds in some ways, but you know, it will have, since you do both, you won't hit as many people as if you just did the broad and that's just it. And similarly, it'll be fewer deep dive folks because we're doing some of the broad outreach. But yeah, I mean, I think that's kind of what I was taking from what Carol Burton was presenting.
Yeah. Interesting.
Let me put out here also that Chris was saying equity and rollout, right? Like what exactly type of language we want to have in that. I'm inclined to have something specific in our language saying that lack of prior contract with the county shall not be a disqualification, or basically something that's saying we really want to make sure that this is open to people who have not been in the door already. And maybe even we have it as a plus factor for people who have not had a prior grant, who have not received, you know, really a lot of times things are put in a way that are like, well, these are the ones that are really worth investing in because, or these are the serious applications and we'll make sure they've already done some of these hoops. And like, well, that's exactly the problem. Or system involvement in whatever different way, like that needs to be a plus factor in this type of environment program, I think, rather than, so if there's a way that we can spell that out, that is saying doors are not shut to anybody, and in fact, we're looking for the non-traditional candidates, please. I want to try to write that in.
I'm sorry, one more time, Jeff, did you say that not having a contract wouldn't preclude you from it? Or did you say
Yeah, I'm saying, like, ideally you haven't had one before. Like, we
Okay.
want to have folks that have had no prior experience in some ways.
Yeah, I guess the only thing with that, because I think that the county actually does contract with smaller organizations that still don't necessarily have the capacity and still need support. And I'm thinking, like, even with some of the AB 109, some of the places that provide AB 109 supports, they may have a county contract, it may still be small, but they probably still need support in building their capacity and their infrastructure.
Yeah, absolutely. I wouldn't want it to be exclusion because you have experience too. It's just, this is not an appropriate fit, but it is kind of the concept of diversion and saying, like, nobody excluded, right? Like, everybody has the opportunity to submit and be considered in an up-down. So, and that's a similar thing that people were saying, well, if you haven't had this necessary experience, we won't consider, and really avoiding that as a policy and saying the door is open for everyone. But I'm also hearing, Stephanie, what you're saying is we don't want to be excluding anybody because they may have had some experience with the county, and that's a good point. This should be building capacity for all who are appropriate for it, and there can be some selection process that, you know, filters out, no, you guys are way more sophisticated and established than we're thinking about. And on the other hand, accepting those that are appropriate.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we don't, I mean, we talked about sort of getting into the weeds behind the scenes, but it sounds like taking into consideration what you both have said there, what we may be wanting to say is that preferential treatment will not be given to organizations who have contracted with the county in the past. Doesn't mean that they are discounted, just saying or spelling out that they're going to be treated the same as even the completely new to the county organization.
And just a quick question of why do we have to say anything? Like, I think if you're going through an RFP process, right? I mean, if the county's focus is, hey, we want to be, you know, inclusive of everything, and just saying, hey, you know, we have a fund, we're looking for everyone to apply, and here's the process. And then, you know, that group that's going to be part of the RFP or whatever, you know, having those discussions, if that's going to be part of, say, your scoring guide or however you want to look at it. Because I get Stephanie's point, and I see it both ways of, you know, you don't want to exclude someone, but you don't also want to penalize, you know, an agency that may already have a contract doing good work, but maybe they still do need help with capacity building. I just don't know the need to have to say, you know, any of it, just other than, hey, we're looking for vast, diverse group of folks to come in and provide a service.
I can speak a little bit from the ORJ a little bit. From my knowledge and understanding of the RFP process, and what I've learned from Dante and from Denise is it can be a pretty rigorous process. And for people who've already done it, whether they're small or large, they've already been through it, so it's a little bit easier for them. But even the small ones that we have, I've heard that it's been challenging for them to hit all of the criteria. Something to.
Thanks for giving that context and experience, Nicole. And I think that that's good to know how ORJ's had the experience in the past. And I mean, Melvin, if I'm hearing what you're saying too, is that, all right, you know, we can provide this necessary experience, but do we need to actually say that out loud in this portion? I mean, you just take that into consideration when you're considering everybody, right? Like you give everybody a fair shake and we'll just know that we're doing that. I guess my concern is, or no, please, I don't want to be speaking, put words in your mouth.
Yeah, no, that's exactly. And I just want to, to Nicole's, point, I sat on those RFP process. They are rigorous, but you take all that into account when you're looking at, hey, this, group A, obviously they have grant writers, the people that can put it on paper, that it looks good. And then you have group B, they don't, but that the sort of work that they do and is good. And that's where I'm just saying, hey, when you actually get into the RFP process, that's when you have those discussions and not penalizing someone whose proposal isn't as strongly written, because you're really trying to get into the weeds and stuff of the actual work and not what they wrote on their RFP.
And yeah, I mean, I think what you're raising, Melvin, is appropriate. And sometimes when you put in guidelines or extra language, it can be limiting, right? Because then, we wanted to accept this person, but now this thing is saying it's in this other way, and it's really keeping us from getting the best person, which can be. And also, I mean, I've had the experience, I bet a lot of people in this call have been part of these things in one way or the other. Sometimes it's really close, right, between these different people. And then you can look at the guidelines and said, remember, we said we were really about folks that haven't had as much experience. So let's give the push factor to them. So it can shape things if one way or the other, for better or worse. So I think if we're thoughtful about it, it might be worth doing, but we have to be wary of the pitfalls that can come from it too. And knowing that it's not going to probably get settled at this moment, we're talking about having at least another session where we're going to hammer out language, but this is just kind of food for our thought as we're moving ahead.
Jeff, real quick, I just wanted to make sure, because I know we kind of passed on from the whole hybrid model. And I wasn't sure, did everybody agree with that? I know Ronell had questions, but just wondering if there was if there's understanding from everybody on kind of why this model was chosen.
Thank you, Steph. That's a good idea to bring us back.
And I think for me, just kind of remembering from the previous conversations, thinking about one of the reasons for the hybrid model, also thinking about kind of the differences between different organizations. And while you may have some organizations that are pretty established, they may have kind of some lesser needs, but still need a little bit of support with building some infrastructure, and may not necessarily need to go on to that second phase. And then you have some people that are gonna probably want to go through both phases. And then you may have some people that kind of go through this first phase and then it's not really what they need to do, or they don't even have the capacity to go through the full process. And so kind of being able to create some options for organizations to participate in.
Thanks for giving that extra info, Stephanie. I think that helps give some context for the idea of the hybrid. So as we're circling back to that, which is a good idea, how is that sitting with everybody? Concept of the hybrid model, questions more about it, thoughts about modifying that some way. I don't know if can we take minutes of thumbs up, thumbs down? How are people thumbs up on the hybrid model? Okay. Yeah, well, it's not a formal vote, folks. This is just a general sense of temperature check on that. So it seems like I'm getting an overall positive-ish feeling on the hybrid model. Feel free to put in the chat if you feel differently. We'll have all different forms of communication here. Okay, not trying to get too cute with that. Lynette.
So as somebody at my first meeting coming in, I was confused about the hybrid model at first, but after Stephanie's explanation, it was helpful. But what it sounds like to me is that this larger group, from those, you'll determine who will go into the actual implementation phase. And I agree that sometimes you'll know, and speaking, as somebody who works with Stand Together Contra Costa, we found that some of our partner agencies were not in a space to provide the services that we were needing. And so that's a good time to have that planning, that pilot phase, so that you can make that determination. I think that it's a good idea. And I also, if it's okay for me to add, as somebody who's new to applying for grants, I think it would be helpful if you want to have more people applying, that you do say, if this is something new to you, or some language along that line, so that folks are not apprehensive because they know that it's a rigorous process, but at least to go ahead and give it a try.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for that feedback. It's especially given your relevant experience with it. Yeah, sometimes just like a little bit of a nod to saying we're open to you. We're a nudge that's invitation. And glad to have the input also on the hybrid model, and that could be worthwhile given what Stephanie was talking about, how it would work. Seeing in chat. Yes. Anything more on this part, on the hybrid versus another model? Okay, I'm getting a general sense that we're in favor of going that route. And then, right, what will it look like the first phase really and the second phase really? There's going to be a lot of detail that we can't sort out at this moment, but it would at least have the 2 phases is what we're suggesting we'll bring to the bigger group. And I imagine there'll be some sort of version of this that happens there, right, of the bigger group saying, well, why are you guys talking about 2 phases rather than 1? And hopefully we'll remember why we were talking about the benefits of it, and at least we'll be able to say, well, we did talk about it in our subcommittee. We didn't come from just putting it out of nowhere. We talked about all the different pros and cons and why we're doing it. And I'll just say some of the things I think it makes sense for us to not do, not to be spelling out the number of grantees or the amount of money or the timeline yet. Like, that's going to just get us into trouble, I think, of what's beyond our ability to forecast. That's at least my take on it. But let's see.
So Jeff.
Yeah, please.
So next steps for this, just so I'm clear, are we going to have somebody volunteer or 2 volunteers to craft a statement and then bring back for the next group? Or are we supposed to bring something back?
I think what would be the case is that this conversation now informs, shapes something that will be a more detailed document than what we have today, right? Like, I have a pretty bare bones doc. What I'm hoping is that we'll have another kind of intra or whatever it is in between the sessions, intersession, with ORJ support, to be able to put together something a little bit more, and then the group can whittle that down, hopefully, or say like, yeah, this is close to what we were saying. I also, as mentioning that, we've had these prep calls between, usually I think it's like the week before or maybe 2 weeks before our subcommittee meeting. And there was a discussion previously of maybe it would be good to have an additional person who would be part of the planning. So I think that that would be good to have a second person who's right, because it was putting together a little bit of this outline, and maybe the outline would look different if there were an additional person who was on the call. You're saying, we should frame it this way. And I think it's worthwhile to have another voice in the mix, especially since I'm particularly I don't know, entrenched in this thing in a sense of like, I've been seeing it through the same way through a long time, right? I can see how I've been coming to this from the project back in 2016. So maybe specifically someone who has a little bit fresher eyes with it, perhaps, and or anyone who's interested. But I do think it'd be good to have a second voice there. Plus, while I'm at it, and this will be addressed later, but sometimes we don't get there. I would like to really encourage someone at our next meeting to at least do the intro of like, welcome everybody. This is our group. This is how we arrived here. Plus, to co-facilitate. It's the feeling of the meeting. All these different things have a different sense when there's another person that's there, and I'm aware of sometimes it's having my own specific spin on it. So enough talking again on that part, but I just wanted to encourage when, Stephanie, as you're saying, well, how is this thing going to get to the next phase? We're going to have this planning meeting. I'll be participating in that. And, I'm tempted to just ask you, Stephanie, to join me in it. And I know you're in a zillion different spaces. So you are invited.
You're so funny. Well, I did have a question. Lynette, are you on our job or no? You're just public visiting the meeting?
Yeah, I'm more so
Okay.
public visiting. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well,
I do work for the county, but
You are so welcome here.
okay. Yes, you are welcome. I just didn't know if you were actually, because we've had some new members. I know Apollo is one of our new members. But I would actually open it up to see if maybe Apollo or Renell would want to support in that process.
Yes. Good
Sorry,
thought.
I missed that last part. Support what?
In co-facilitating these meetings with Jeff. And maybe do some planning with him.
Especially if I did a prep call with you and talked about what that might look like and kind of.
Yeah, I'm more than willing. I'm more than willing to help facilitate. I would just this is obviously my first meeting, and so today is kind of more of a sit, watch, and contribute where I can. And then maybe we could touch base separately or after the meeting is over to talk about what that would look
Apollo,
like. I'd be
you're
more
on
than willing.
mute.
No,
Or
I'm hearing Apollo.
It's
Huh. Was he coming through for everybody else? I was hearing.
Yeah, I could hear him.
Okay. Well, that would be fabulous. I'll take you up on it, Apollo, and good idea, Stephanie. Yeah, to talk together about that and what exactly kind of having in mind would be fabulous. So let's you and I connect after, and I'll invite you to join at that prep call in between these sessions too thing and see if that works with your schedule, if we can find a mutually convenient time. Fantastic.
Yeah, sounds good to me.
And Ronell, I think that'd be great if you're interested in getting in the mix in one of these upcoming sessions too. So open invitation to you for a future session as well. Okay, so going back to where we was, I did a little bit of a detour on where we were with the community capacity fund, but knowing that we're going to try to fill this in a little bit more. We were talking about the hybrid model. We were talking about the different kind of aspects that are already there. I'm thinking the next steps that need to happen here, what I'm taking away is that we have a proposed statement of purpose finalized thing, which ultimately we can accept or reject there, that we might have some guidelines in terms of who would be criteria, basically. I'm going to say equity guidelines. Knowing also, apropos of the conversation with Melvin, maybe we don't end up doing those, but we have some draft language that we consider accepting or rejecting. And I don't know if there's more than that, right? I mean, this is, again, it's super simple. There's a planning phase and there's an implementation phase. It's like pretty basic, but maybe that's enough. And that we have those little modifications. We bring it to this subcommittee at our next meeting. And then if we feel satisfied with that, the plan would be to send it to the full RJOB at the quarterly. How's that sound? Okay, cool.
I think,
yeah.
I think the only thing I would add, Jeff, if there's maybe just a little bit more information, just to pull from Jewel Legacy's presentation around like a little description of the phases. I know you have the bullet points there, but maybe just like a sentence or two.
Kind of filling this out of,
yeah.
Right, just when I say implementation phase, planning phase.
I'm assuming they probably have something in that presentation, but.
Yeah, I think so too. Okay, great. So that'll be the plan for next time. And then we'll do a little bit of word working between now and then. Okay, we're at 4:12, 4:10. I'm just kind of bookmarking some of this for when we were getting back to our notes later, because we're not doing the minutes record of action thing because we have this recorded. But we also talked about just kind of having like, all right, if I'm going to look through these notes and remember when did what happen. I think we started just at about 3:20 this section, and now we're at about 4:12 moving on to the next one. So hi, viewers at home. If you're watching this in the future, a few number of viewers, I'm sure. Let's see, moving to our next section, which is talking about the Youth Advisory Council. And boy, there's been a lot of things in time that's happened between our November meeting and now, because that's the subcommittee time that has passed, I believe, truly since we had met. But December, I want to say like 15th, somewhere around there, we did have a call together, and Chris was there, I believe, and Stephanie was there, and Issa was on the call, right? And we had a few folks that were talking to us about what the experience might look like. And I'll just, again, put this in a very, very general context to say this concept of having an advisory body or some group that's deputized by the Board of Supervisors to take actions, to have its own agendas, to make decisions, that is going to be all the persons that are on that council would be youth persons. So I guess 25 and under, something like that. We define it however that is, but the idea is that really be the decision makers, power people would be young people. So to give more of an update on what that meeting was, I guess I'd say, I remember us talking about, well, you know, this would be a longer term investment for these folks. It would be making sure that everybody feels like they are sufficiently supported, getting the education necessary, comfort level to participate. And we talked about, I think, included in that, would there be would there be actually a stipend to payment to young people participating, and which communities would we be most targeting in terms of our outreach, and another way of saying who do we really want to make sure is having a seat at the table. So that's general my memory of, but I would invite Stephanie and Chris and Jill, were you on that call too? I'm trying to recall who was all present as we were talking, but anyone who has additional memories of that in between call to give a little bit more detail.
I think that's about right. I feel like that was so long ago.
It was so long ago, I know.
I can't really remember too much, but yeah, I think that was about right. I think for this too, one of the things that was expressed is to have not only a diverse group of young people on the council from across the county, but also with diverse experiences. I think that's one of the other things that came up in this. And there are, I know they weren't able to make it before, but there are some young people like from the East County area that would like to participate in some of the planning around this.
Yeah, I would add, first of all, to piggyback on what Stephanie said, right? You definitely, the tendency with groups like this is to kind of get, to tap the youth that adults tend to be most comfortable with, for any number of reasons, right? They might be like amazingly accomplished students or something like that. Like we tend to do that. And if we're talking about something that's going to make a group that's assembled to make sure that youth are essentially signing off on or editing or revising the types of policy and practice changes that could come from this group or groups like it, because they will be directly impacted by it. That touches everyone, not just those youth that adults tend to be most comfortable with, but also folks who have some lived experience within, say, a local justice system, or you know what I mean, these types of things. So important to make sure that there is diversity in that regard. And also, I think one of the things that we also got into during that meeting, the only thing I think that I haven't heard so far is, remember the initial conception of this was have a listening session, and through that listening session sort of recruit you to be a part of this council. And so part of the conversation we're also having is how exactly do we advertise, if you will, or what are the channels to use to reach out to the types of folks that we would want, particularly over that diverse range of youth, to make sure that everybody's got the word, everybody's got ample opportunity to show up and participate if they want to. So.
Thanks, Chris. Yeah, all of that completely. And Apollo, please.
Yeah, it's real quick. So I know one venue. I'm not sure if you guys had talked about other opportunities and other ways to promote. I'm pretty heavily involved in the school districts out here. I'm in schools from Richmond to Walnut Creek to Antioch to Livermore, all around kind of Contra Costa County. In 2 different venues, whether I'm going like through my church or I worked with like a nonprofit called Teen Esteem. And so I'm on campuses pretty frequently. I'm not sure if anyone else in this group is. And if there's any like material I could like hand out, that would be phenomenal for me. I know that I haven't been able to be on campus because of COVID, but schools are starting to open back up again. And so once we do that, I'll be able to kind of pass out material and help get the word out that way, at least, whether it's like through being on campuses or even distributing it through my students who can also spread the word. I know I personally have a few students who are like waiting at the edge of their seat, waiting to get involved. So whenever we do launch something like this, I'd love to have at least some of my students, and then we can promote to the rest of the county as well.
Thanks, Apollo. That'd be great. Yeah, Steph.
So one of the things that, and thank you, Chris, because I completely forgot about the listening campaign or the listening session. Totally forgot about that. Maybe we should think about like when exactly it would be a good time to have that. When do we want to kind of reconvene? And I think Apollo, even thinking about, because it's not like we necessarily have any type of flyer to pass out right now, but, and we may have talked about this a little bit at the last meeting too, but how are there like different ways that we can include young people in this process, not just with the listening session part, but is it like having a young person actually create the flyer for it, or having a young person create like a TikTok or something for it, but finding different ways that we can involve them in the process, not just to extract information from them.
Yeah.
I think if we did do something social media based, I don't think it should be any of us. I think one of the things that teenagers hit most is like anyone over 20 years old trying to promote to them. And so if we do have some kids out the gates who want to help out, like if they're the ones that facilitate something like that, obviously we'd have like access and like be able to push some content, but like the face of the franchise, it shouldn't be any of us.
Yeah, no, I wasn't talking about doing a TikTok.
No, what I heard was you're gonna start a TikTok and you're about to be viral.
No stopping.
If that's the case, I'm opting out of that.
But I think that's a great point, Apollo, and that speaks to also, I think, the way we envision even the listening session and that recruitment effort, right? Because that was all meant to be youth-led, right? So it was a situation going back to, I think, some of the things that both Jeff and Stephanie mentioned, right? When we were talking about it, it was, we've got to support young people and, first of all, taking them through the process of what would you want this to be, right? We are the RJOB, this is what we do. It can impact you. How would you want your voice to be heard? How would you want to participate in that? And then how do you develop an event or a series of events as necessary to get other people on board and to get them to participate in something that you design to make sure that your voice and that your input and ultimately your approval is on things that happen in the county that impact you as a young person, right? And so I think that just falls right in line with what you just said, right? Even in terms of the promotion of it, not even just facilitating the event itself, but the promotion of it should also be youth-led, because they're the experts in reaching, their peers. We are not, I don't want to call us all washed, but I mean, essentially that's what I just heard, where I guess we're all washed. We're too washed for TikTok. And so we will make sure that every step of the way we're including youth voice and giving them opportunities to shine, to learn, to grow, to develop, as well as to actively be heard in the development of policy and practice changes that will impact them in the county.
I'm glad my kids aren't downstairs when you just called me washed up, Chris. I don't know if I'd be able to go on.
Well, we dodged a bullet there. That's a good thing. Okay, so yeah, youth in the process throughout, for sure. I think authenticity, success, completely. I'm wondering what we feel like our next steps are between now and then, given that we don't have folks under 20 in the room. But how do we move from point A to point B? I mean, right, we have to put a proposal out there for young folks to say, no, that's not a good time, or something like that, to kind of maybe propose that we have a youth listening session 2 months, 3 months from now. And that's the general, like, when we're talking to people, what if we had a youth listening session in 3 months? What would you want that to look like, right? To have something that is the beginning of a conversation. Because it can't be like, you know, we're gonna have a youth listening session in this place at this time, and that's already too much, right? But maybe that's the idea that is out there, to say, we're excited about this idea. We're gonna have some session coming up, or maybe more than one. What do you think? And that'll be a few months out. And then we report back here in 1 month to say, this is the feelers I've had on it. Already, as I'm talking about, I'm like, this is too vague, and we're gonna come back in a month and be like, what did we say? So it needs a little bit more shape.
Yeah, I think you probably want to start with, so I mean, I don't want to put anybody on the spot. Just heard from Apollo, who has, in particular, some students who are interested in being a part of this. I am sure, I'm going to put her on the spot, I'm sure that good old Stephanie and Rise, there are probably some youth, you know, who would also want to be involved. I think trying to bring a group of them together to ask these questions of, but like for real ask, right? Because we've done some sort of talking around this in the past, and get some idea of the time, realizing that folks are going to be out of school soon. There's going to be graduations, perhaps, or something that resembles a pre-pandemic graduation, I suppose, in a couple of months. And so those things may impact the timeline, but wanting to get a sense from them of you know, what this should look like, when it should happen, and from there trying to make sure that we you know, make sure that we have access to the capacity we're going to need to support them in building up to that moment.
Mhm. Yeah, I was just gonna add, I mean, I think it would be good to get the group that we had at the last meeting. And I think one of the things that we talked about was bringing some young people that we work with directly to the next meeting. And so I think going ahead and getting that scheduled along with like young people Apollo may have, and see if that can be maybe like our kind of main planning group. I think from our end, what would be important is to have a solid agenda to help walk them through. Because we can't just be like, well, what do you want? It's like, I don't know. So we have to be able to support them in thinking through some things. And so I can support with like trying to figure out what would be a good way to craft an agenda so that we can actually have maybe some next steps and what that'll look like. And also, like Chris said, there's a lot happening around school right now, and yeah, engagement may look completely different. I don't know. Things are just so up in the air.
Yeah.
I don't know if Jill's still on, but I'm wondering if there's a way to do like a poll before the meeting that you plan to have them at, to have some input from them coming into the meeting or something. I don't know from a Brown Act standpoint if that's something that can happen, but.
You can, I mean, you can certainly put out like a doodle poll, or, you know, some kind of a little Survey Monkey poll, and send it out to, you know, whoever's wanting feedback, send it out to those youth, and then bring that feedback into the next meeting.
Yeah, I think that could be worthwhile. I mean, right, we were talking about just the different ways that we can try to solicit feedback, and some of that is verbal, and some of that may be in different written form, however that is. So yes, I want to take up the offer to be in communication, Stephanie, that you were saying with folks that might be able to participate. It just wanted to like make sure that I was understanding when you were saying that we have an agenda, meaning like an agenda for them joining us at our next subcommittee meeting, or like an agenda
No.
for, yeah,
I mean, the agenda for the planning meeting
okay,
with them.
yeah.
Yeah, it's great point. That's I'm gonna say it a little bit less filtered, I'll say, right? So I think the point is the conversations that we've had in the past, while they've been good, have been very sort of vague, have lacked some level of direction. So we just kind of end up saying, hey, we have this idea, that we want to hear directly from you on this stuff, and we don't want to we don't want to do anything about you without you, essentially. What do you think of that? How do we do that without really giving more of a structure or a sense of, what all that can mean? And so having, an agenda and perhaps even some level of laying some groundwork or some context, wouldn't have to be anything too crazy, but, a slide or two, something, right, that says, this is what we're trying to accomplish. We know that we're charged with creating policy and practice changes that should improve racial equity. As far as you're concerned in the youth justice system, that's something that you and your peers could be impacted by in some way. We want to hear from young people. Young people do not sit on this body. How do we do that? How would you want to be involved in that? Is that something you feel like people your age would commit to on some regular basis, right? Like there are a number of questions there that we have, and we just kind of end up sort of just asking them at random, as opposed to sort of having a game plan for what exactly we're trying to find out, and moving through that one by one, and making sure that we answer those questions well in a way that we can move forward before we move on to the next one.
Thanks, Chris. I think, yeah, that helps make it clear of what this could be. And then I guess my next thought is, when might we have a planning session? I mean, like that, I guess our next move after today.
I think my instinct is it depends on folks that we've already identified, namely Stephanie and Apollo, right? Finding out from the youth that they directly work with what might work for them, which might require, like we just said, some sort of doodle poll or something like that to try to find a time that's going to work, because the best way to move it forward and actually have some momentum is to get direct feedback from young people and move it from there.
Yeah, the last meeting, we got dates from the young people that were on there first, and then presented them to you all to see if you could fit within any of those. So I would say we should do the same thing. So maybe Apollo and I can connect and see if we can coordinate some dates.
That'd be fabulous.
Hey,
That would
Melvin,
be
I don't know if
fabulous.
you're
I
able to
agree.
speak to this, but I know that there was, the probation had that teen dating violence awareness event that you guys put on. Was it last month? Were you
Not
there for
familiar.
that?
No, I wasn't there for that.
I was just wondering if the format of that could feed into the format that you guys are planning for this at all. Any lessons learned or things that worked, or
Maybe we can try to find out more about that event and kind of what had gone into it and how it worked out.
I think that was in conjunction with the Antioch School District.
Thanks, Joe. I wasn't familiar with it myself, but worthwhile to look into some of the recent, whatever recent models that we can have for consideration.
I
Okay.
think it's relevant because it was virtual too, so it'll be interesting to see what the outcome was.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, everything in the new environment, it's harder and harder to find relevant examples. Okay, so next step on that is that we thank and appreciate Apollo and Stephanie for being in contact between now and the next meeting, and seeing what is possible for kind of brainstorming next steps, and that we'll see what the agenda will look like for next month based on communications between now and then. So that's where I have, we're 4:35 right now. We're still going to just do our last wrap up things, but I don't know if there's additional content or items that people want to add to this. I will maybe, oh yeah, Renell, you unmuted. Was there something you wanted to add?
Yeah, well, I was just gonna say, piggybacking on what Chris was saying, was that during that time while Paulo and Stephanie is checking on availability with the youth, should we all be, personally trying to formulate some of those questions he was talking about? So, to try to expedite that. So when they do come back with a time and all that, we already have maybe, 10 or so questions, collectively together, or something that we, already have in place to expedite that process. So we won't be holding up on that as well. Just to, just food for thought. Just say,
Yeah.
Because what he said made a lot of sense too. Let's have some meat and potatoes too, as they're working with the availability with the youth. We could be working on that as well.
Some of the content that will be given to be the jumping off point, right? Have some of that already worked out.
Yeah, and then basically, and then some of the questions that we have for them, as well. Instead of, like he said, some type of a open session or a vague session, we would have some targeted questions for them in particular to try to help us shape what we're doing as well.
Absolutely. Try to make use of the time that we're not waiting for step one to happen before we start working on step two. If we can make use of this time and be ready for step two when it's there.
Right.
Absolutely. And maybe I'll just circle back to, there was some conversation at the very beginning of this about making sure that we have a range of life experience on the Youth Advisory Council. And I can kind of see different ways in which this is sort of a parallel to the previous conversation we were having with the Community Capacity Fund, because can we just say that, all persons' experience will be valued, and that nobody's life experience will be a disqualifier, and then we come with an open mind. And then at the same time, if we have these certain factors of saying we really want to prioritize this certain life experience or make sure that it's open, that we'll be able to encourage kind of the concept Lynette was saying before, something that is really signaling the door is open and we want to. And I think I was saying perhaps in the planning call with Chris, that my sense is if we spent all of our time saying we're really wanting to outreach to people who have had, for example, experience at juvenile hall or whatever that may be, even so, we're going to get a tiny fraction of people that have that life experience, and most of the other people are going to be your traditional candidate. That's my guess. And if we're flooded with people that have had some sort of system involvement, we go, we went too far here. We didn't get enough people in the traditional candidates. But I don't think that that's going to happen. And that if we really have with our mindset, we have to have young people here who are having not just the valedictorian experience like, you know, Chris was talking about, and have a variety of experience to weigh in on these things, that we'll be having a much more valuable process, informed process. Nothing that's settled in this moment, is just kind of my little editorial on that, because we're going to be having next steps, right? So some of this is just shaping what it might be, but my 2 cents on that piece.
And Ronell, I think just kind of speaking to what you were saying, specifically, we're talking about the planning meeting that we want to have with the young people, not necessarily the meeting with the subcommittee, but kind of this initial planning meeting for what a potential listening session could look like. And so just having a plan, a structured plan, to not give them questions or ask them questions necessarily, but to support them in actually creating what this event can look like.
Cool.
Got you.
So I think perhaps we're at a point where we're ready to pivot to the next agenda item. I'll just open to say, you know, it's not going to be completely tied up. This is going to be continuing. And yes, so let me just appreciate the reminder to ask for public comment here on this agenda item before we would move on. So is there any public comment on the Youth Advisory Council?
Yeah, I have a question. So I only found out about even like the Racial Justice Oversight Board just from like a reference. Someone told me about it. What was done to promote like this body in the first place, so I can kind of have a picture for how we plan on doing it for like youth?
Yeah, I mean, I can say I remember, in addition to your website and flyers, which I don't mean to diminish, I'm saying, but yeah, your traditional, that would be out there. We did have a series of town hall events of that was part of what the task force had done, was in different regions of the county. I think there had been 4 or 5 of them, saying, you know, this is who we are, what we're doing, and that had led to the next phase of the oversight body, which I'm not sure if there were, I don't think that there were town hall events specifically for once the oversight body was created. I think those were things that happened with the task force before, but I don't know if others have more memory on outreach specific for RJOB.
Yes,
Thanks. I'm just, go ahead, sir.
I was just going to say that, looks like I'm freezing up. So there was the effort, the 2-year effort of the Racial Justice Task Force, which was a very large effort with a lot of community input. There was 5 different town halls, 1 in each district. And then that led to the recommendations at the Board of Supervisors and the Racial Justice Oversight Body. And then each of the supervisors promoted it in their news blasts. And then any other ways, you know, anywhere that we were, the ORJ helped promote it as well to get applicants. It was advertised on our websites as well.
Thanks, Jill. Yeah, that helps fill in some of the detail and over time.
Okay, great. Yeah, my thought was just like for students who typically like wouldn't like go to a town hall meeting or wouldn't just go to the Contra Costa website, like the best way to get things in their hands. I think social media is great, but even to get that out there is going to take probably some initial like passing out of material. So I'm not sure if there's anyone that did that in the past that was over that kind of promoted the RJOB. And that would be great. I would love to connect with someone so I can get stuff on campuses. I think that would be a great start. I would love to help out any way I can.
I'm just jump in there real quick. For anything that we're looking for youth, I reach out to the superintendents in our district and share the information so that they can reach out to their student bodies and their advisors and all of that to get the word out to students. So
Awesome. Sounds good.
And I'm also thinking that perhaps the Safe Return Project and some of the outreach that they had done for RJOB might be allies in this too. So Shayla is not on in this subcommittee, but could be another partner to talk to in terms of just outreach to folks in terms of making sure that the word is out there about the process. Although I'm sure Rise had some outreach in this too. It's just, I'm thinking specifically that this was the adult space for the RJOB. So some overlap there. Other public comment on the Youth Advisory Council? Or open up to anything really? Okay. I would move to our next agenda item, which is scheduling and then adjourning. So we're basically at the rounding the corner here end of our time. The only notable thing I would say would be when we were at the quarterly, we were talking about 1 to 3 instead of 3 to 5, and that I think had been based on Cheryl Sutton's schedule as well as Krause's schedule, that there was a conflict that made 3 to 5 not possible. I think if I'm remembering right, she had something that was 3 to 4. I was saying, well, what if we did 1 to 3? And I was like, well, that could work. And Cheryl was saying, yeah, that could work. Well, that's at least my memory of where we were. So putting that out there, in some sense, I'm always like dancing on, I don't know if I'm going to be able to make it because I'm in the middle of the trial. So whatever. I think in some sense, 1, 3, 3 to 5 is going to be the same difference for me. Not that that's really a relevant point for everybody else. I guess I'll just say I could do those times. How does that work for other people to change this meeting? The standing time has been our second Thursday, 3 to 5, and now the proposal is, what if it were second Thursday, 1 to 3?
On Thursdays?
Mm-hmm.
So
Second Thursday, 1 to 3.
The DJJ subcommittee meets every Thursday from 12 to 1:30.
Yeah, I was gonna say the same thing.
So that Thursday at 1 to 3 doesn't work for us.
Okay, well, 3 to 5 still work. I mean, honestly, part of what I was having for consideration with this was Issa's schedule, but if 3 to 5 is the best fit, it's still working for me. I know it was not for heading before 4 works best for me. Okay. Thank you, Apollo, for putting in comment. We have to be considering for everybody. 2 to 4. How's that for people? Yeah. Melvin, does that work?
I'm in a meeting from 2 to 3, so that wouldn't work for me.
Okay.
I mean, but I guess one of the things to think about, like, does it work if we only do hour-long meetings? Possibly.
Yeah, I was going to bring that up, or hour and a half. I think this, out of all the committees, I think this is the one that goes 2 hours.
Okay. If the others are meeting an hour and a half, I think, well, I guess maybe regardless if the other ones are, but it's instructive to know what the other people are doing. Yeah, I think we could get business done in an hour and a half. I do think with everything, sometimes an hour is going to be tight to whatever, all the different pieces to have the full conversation on it. Chris, or you're gonna?
Yeah, just to clarify, I think all of the subcommittee meetings are slated for 2 hours. It's just most of them don't end up going the full time. We move through the agendas pretty fast, and just a facilitating tip: if you can give people time back, they will always take it, and they will always appreciate your facilitation. So. Yeah, I think they were all slated to go 2 hours. It's just it can be pretty rare. Sometimes if there's a lot of content in a meeting, then it'll take the whole time. But a lot of times they don't. And the other thing I would add is you guys don't have to. I mean, this is your time to think about scheduling. You don't even have to keep it on a Thursday, right? Like you could change days now. That's going to change, deadlines in terms of, getting agendas out and things like that. So you just want to make sure that you're mindful of that. But if another day would work better, that's another option as well. That all being said, if Thursdays from 3 to 5, tentatively, but especially if we can keep it within 3 to 4:30 range works for everyone, then we can also stick to this. So.
Yeah. Okay. Stephanie, what was the time slot that you had to call?
It's actually 2 to 3:30. I just leave early. So if we could do 3 to 4, that will work.
Uh-huh.
Or 3 to 4:30.
That's what I'm thinking. Maybe we do 3 to 4:30. Does the difference between 4 and 4:30 make a difference to you, Apollo? Or is it like, well, we're past 4 is whatever, same difference?
For me, I will probably just have to leave a half hour early. Today was tough for me. If you notice, I turned my camera off a couple times. I'm in the middle of doing a couple other things and another meeting I had to hop in that I facilitate that starts at 4. And so I had someone else co-lead with me so I can hop off and go back and forth. But it's traditionally going to be difficult for me to continue to go past 4. But I can just leave early if I need to.
I appreciate you doing double duty right now. So want to take that into consideration too. Maybe we do try 3 to 4:30, knowing that you already have the existing conflict and that you'd have to go at 4, and that'd be appropriate, and try to go from there for at least a trial run for this next session would be let me grab my calendar, would be April 8th from 3 to 4:30 is what we're talking about. Yeah. Bonus, shorter, and maybe it works better with people's schedule. So those are positive factors. Do we vote? We say vote's available. I hate to vote on something if we don't need to, but I think this is an informal thing and then a vote isn't necessary. That's my take on it, but I don't know.
Do a reverse vote. If anybody has a problem with it, say something.
Yeah, informal consensus thing here. I didn't catch that. What was that, Nicole?
I said vote to not vote.
Yeah, exactly. We'll take silence on this one as everyone's okay with not voting, I think, unless I hear otherwise. So, all right, that's our tentative time. That's what we're talking about doing. And
I will change the invite so you guys see that on your end.
Thank you very much. So my last points that I have would be that I'm remembering Chris's words of wisdom that if you give the time back, everyone will appreciate it. So just about to do that. And maybe that will happen more often if we trade up facilitation, like I was saying. Okay, so more next time, everybody. Thank you, everyone. Looking forward to the next session. Appreciate everyone's time and attention and energy. And we'll be in contact soon.
Thanks, Jeff. Bye, everyone.
Thank you, Jeff.
Yes.
Thanks,
Take care.
everybody.
See you guys next time.
Appreciate it.